Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I like to talk a lot about leadership, and I'm going to show you some great examples of that today. This is Dick Fuld, CEO of Lehman Brothers. The thing you need to know about Dick is that he was the ultimate micromanager. Everything was under his control, right? Except the loss of the company at the end of the day. Okay? But Dick was the one who knew everything, who had his finger on everything. This is Jimmy Kane, Bear Stearns, the other side of the spectrum. When Bear Stearns was melting down, he was at a bridge tournament. He was known to play golf 4 times a week as the company was going down the tubes, literally. Okay? So you have two opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of leaders running their companies. Here's Stan O'Neill from Merrill Lynch. While Merrill Lynch was imploding, his handicap was going down. The other message here is that you're actually not in control, because anything about you the press will find and publish. Any press in the room, apologies. But the real message here is CEOs probably need a bit of balance. Micromanagement or the ultimate macro management is not the right answer. Is ego the best indicator of fraud? Another thing about CEOs, there are a lot of CEOs who have this just incredible bravado. Think about some in history, like Jeff Skilling. Remember Enron? Remember how confident he was? How about this fellow? I can generate 12% annual returns, no questions asked, no questions answered. Don't even, if you want to ask me a question, I'm going to throw you out of my office. How's that for arrogant? And by the way, the other message is don't rely on the SEC to find this stuff. Okay? But Satyam, another great example of a meltdown. Now, when we're talking about control, the one thing that people that are not in the CEO's chair need to remember always, the simplest maxim, if it looks too good to be true, it is, without doubt. Now, there are a lot of externalities that CEOs deal with. This is David Einhorn, who sold Lehman short. Dick Fuld blames him for bringing the company down. But in reality, the short sellers you probably can't control at the end of the day. They're going to be out there. And as a CEO, you've got to deal with it. Here's another situation, okay? The press, the shareholders, all after the CEO. Eventually, it's going to result in the downfall of the CEO. What I'm painting here, by the way, is this is a really hard job, okay? A lot of you in the room know this. The next one, going back to what Sumitra said. Again, in terms of out of control, one of the things I realize is that most CEOs actually don't write their own blogs. Keep that in mind. Major risk going into social media as a CEO, in my own personal opinion. Now, Stan O'Neill, another factor. Stan O'Neill, to me, was the ultimate leader in name only, because the other thing Stan did, which this headline is pointing out, is he surrounded himself with people that only said yes. He had the ultimate failure of a CEO in that there were a lot of things out of his control. I mentioned the press before, but he didn't listen, and he didn't listen to the right people. This is a picture of a fellow named Jerome Kerviel. He lost 5 billion euro for SocGen. His boss, Daniel Bouton, went down as a result. The question here is, could Daniel Bouton really control what was happening in that organization to that level? Exxon Valdez. How can you control, when you think about it as a CEO and you think about the multitude of risks that are out there, the ultimate paradox of control is thinking that you really are in control. When you think about things that can happen like the Valdez. Or let's just say we're Phil Knight of Nike, and we've bet our entire brand on Tiger Woods. And one morning we wake up and realize that Tiger Woods has crashed his car, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse. The impact on the brand, it used to be Martha Stewart was the best example, no longer. The other thing in terms of the don't rely on externalities to fix it, boards. There's a whole nother category in terms of risk management and who's responsible, but I do think that in terms of creating the right CEOs and supporting the right CEOs, boards aren't the answer. Lastly, listen. Klaus Schwab has said, and others at the forum have said, since 2003, we've talked about things being out of control. Since 2003, no one listened. So the last message is, if you want to be a good CEO, listen to the World Economic Forum. Thank you.